69 years ago, an 18-year-old man died in Taunton. Not too many took notice of it at that time, perhaps just a small circle of family, friends, and acquaintances. There was no extensive obituary published, and the main mourners were, of course, the parents of an only son whose dreams of ever having future grandchildren had vanished, and in particular, a father who might have hoped that his son succeed him in the family-run grocery business, for his son had already proved to be business-minded, and his people skills were sufficiently honed and able to please loyal customers. Some had thought that if the boy didn't join the family business, he would pursue a career in music, as he was quite talented, especially on the piano. Indeed, faced with many various options that were open to a very intelligent, talented, highly motivated, and well-polished young man in 1954, Ronald Tosti died the first time as he chose to pursue the studies and formation necessary to become a priest. And from that death, an abundance of life has unquestionably ensued. Life for him, life for the church in this diocese of Fall River, life for the thousands of its faithful whom he served so well, life for the cousins he adopted as siblings, life for the colleagues he embraced as his brothers, and life for the family of friends he cultivated wherever he may have been over the course of better than 6 decades. Appropriately, this is the Paschal season, when we celebrate the mystery that it is at the very heart of our faith and actually at the center of all life, that in Jesus Christ, who has died, but who has risen, death is not only the portal, but actually the day-to-day path to newness of life. Ron Tosti set out on that path of dying to self to rise with Jesus Christ in his young adulthood, and he never looked back. After his initial decision to answer that call to priesthood, little deaths would keep coming in the form of the continuous sacrifices he would be called to make, both big and small, and the inevitable disappointments that come to anyone who tries to serve a complicated and imperfect church, and through the sad departures and personal losses that are part of Ron's life as they are part of the life of every parish priest. Yet life would also come abundantly in the lives blessed by his pastoral care and his wise preaching, the hearts changed by his love and his friendship, and the amazing accomplishments for the church to which he dedicated himself and his whole life. So let us thank God today for the life of Msgr Ronald Tosti, which illustrates the mystery expressed for us by St. Paul in his letter to the Romans, that by baptism we are all initiated into Christ's own dying, so that in union with Christ we must thus ever after be rising to newness of life. Some of us who have often heard Monsignor preach on occasions like this over the years were a little bit amused, but not surprised, that he had chosen for his own funeral mass a gospel passage he favored using for many of the funerals he himself had celebrated. Thus, we know well how Monsignor himself understood and preached this passage from the 25th chapter of St. Matthew. It is what he liked to call the bottom line gospel, the message of which he realized each need to grasp and apply to themselves as it will be the criteria used at our final judgment. As Monsignor himself understood it, and was often heard to say, we will all be asked one question by Jesus Christ when we must stand before him face to face. What did you do with what I gave you? If his obituary is any indication, his will not be a short nor simple answer. But the truth of the matter is that it actually could have been a good deal longer. Perhaps even a book of 22,595 pages, one for every day of his life as a priest, from May 11th, 1962 till April 6th, 2024. While there will be those who may remain his detractors for one reason or another, as is the case with all of us, as we know, who step forward to serve as clergy. But on the other hand, you don't have to go far, and certainly we heard last night in this church many moving accounts of his exceptional pastoral care for people, especially any who were hurting or alienated or suffering in any way. Indeed, Monsignor Tosti, who to those who truly didn't know him well, could appear a bit imperious at times, especially if they pushed the wrong buttons. Yet, fundamentally, he was a most empathetic and caring man whose eyes could frequently and easily well with tears as they revealed his tender-heartedness. Personally, I can, and I always will, bear witness that by his personal warmth, his great good humor, his gracious and generous hospitality, that the 3 years I was privileged to be in residence with him here while serving as hospital chaplain were 3 of the happiest years of my own priestly life. Those were years during which my understanding of priestly fraternity was significantly changed and deepened by the camaraderie that we shared together in the house, and also with other priests he often entertained here, and especially those he would include as guests during Holy Week, those with whom he was acquainted or whom he had served with, who were now retired, and he feared they'd be alone during those special days of our church here. And in judging him, the Lord may weigh any of a great number of ways in which Monsignor sought to recognize him and serve him in others as of great significance. But surely Ron himself left this world ready to present this parish, established in honor of Christ's kingship, as the most cherished accomplishment of his nearly 62 years of priestly ministry. Indeed, as in his first assignment in Osterville, he had to travel about to St. Jude's in Cotuit and to the Papaneset Community Center to celebrate Masses each Sunday, and then, because of that, saw to the establishment of the Queen of All Saints Chapel. The then very young Father Tosti recognized the need and dreamt of the possibility of a parish to be established from Marston's Mills to Mashpee. When Bishop Cronin eventually gave him that opportunity in 1984, Ron enthusiastically invested all his time, energy, and talent to turn that dream into a reality as he called together, and at no small cost in any definition of the word, eventually housed this community of faith in this beautiful church and this extensive parish complex. So today and every day that we gather here to worship or come together to learn or to socialize or to serve our neighbors in need together as this community of faith is in no small way always thanks to the foundational work of Msgr Ronald Tosti. So let us happily pay our debt of gratitude to him through frequent remembrance of his soul in prayers and masses here, and let us express our thanks to God through continued faithful worship, authentic witness, and generous charity to our neighbors in need. What did you do with what I gave you? The answer Msgr can give is, I took your gifts, Lord, multiplied them, and returned them to you for as long as I was able. As we look beyond his active years to the more recent, we may debate whether those last several years of his life were actually sent or merely permitted by the Lord. Yet surely as a long Lent of sorts, in preparation for an eternal Easter, what was accomplished during that final chapter of his life is not at all insignificant either. For the majority of his life, thank God, Msgr was blessed with health of mind and body. And in the first decade of his retirement, he had the time and the resources to travel and to enjoy life fully. And he believed it was his duty to do so because he saw this life for what it is. It's a gift given only once here, so to be made the most of. As he is so often quoted as saying, this is not a dress rehearsal. Yet as he embraced life, any who knew him well could sense that he was at the same time perhaps running from death. Yet inevitably, his health, and with it his strength, began to wane. Soon the limits that come with the passing of time, or as he was fond of saying, the affliction of TMB, too many birthdays, became present. And for some significant stretches of time, confined him to care facilities across Cape Cod. And while amazingly, he usually fought his way back, he never quite got back as far as he once was able in terms of his physical strength and ultimately his mobility. Gradually, he went from living independently in his beloved home in Cotuit with its beautiful gardens to assisted living in West Yarmouth. On a Sunday afternoon in October, I dropped by to see him at Maplewood. He was in his chair in his bedroom, alert and animated, but unable to get up on his own and not with my help even assisted by Carol. During my visit with him that day, I remarked that he might soon be running out of space for all those pictures that he had on his wall. Not paintings, but personal pictures of people beloved by him. He glanced over at them all and nodding his head in agreement, he then turned to me and said, well, with the exception of yourself and a few others, they all have something in common. I said, oh yeah, what's that? He looked at me with a certain look that revealed he had been brooding on this for some time, and then said, they're all dead, Eddie. It has to happen to all of us eventually. It was that day that I sensed he had begun to appreciate that more have passed to the other side than remain here. And so he himself was getting ready to resign himself to the reality of his own death too. And while during the 2 hospitalizations and a nursing facility stay which followed that conversation that day, he still put up a fair fight of sorts. But just before the beginning of this new year, his once very active, full, and accomplished life was reduced to one room in the Catholic Memorial Home, where his greatest desire remained to be able to say Mass for his fellow residents, and of his many treasures accumulated across a lifetime, in the end, what remained and was most valuable to him was that wall full of those pictures of familiar faces of family and friends. But amazingly, he seemed quite content in this much smaller space, with much less left for anyone to have to move as he was moving out of the world. And as his friend Ann Carney, who talked to him frequently, reported from a conversation she held with him last Friday night by phone, he did not feel well that day, but seemed to be very much at peace. So it appears that he was not only closer, but more prepared than ever before to be summoned to render his answer to that question posed in that bottom line gospel, and at peace in the hopeful anticipation of being allowed to see many of the faces on that wall once again. The psalmist says, "Precious in the eyes is the death of his faithful." And so we might see the Lord and his grace at work in slowing the pace of Monsignor's life down to a crawl to get him ready for the most important meeting of his life. So with Monsignor's example committed to our memories, let us continue on our own path of daily dying and rising with Jesus Christ. Indeed, our living out of the one Paschal mystery, trusting that if we keep faith and regularly seek Christ in the Eucharist and try to recognize him in others, especially those who have some need, then the Lord can and will lead us through the ups and even the inevitable downs of our lives to where we want to go, which is where he lives forever as our King. So let us move forward in life toward that ultimate destination with the hopeful assurance born of faith that when our life of Lenten suffering eventually yields to Easter joy, that among all of the faces of those we have missed most and will be overjoyed to see, we will surely recognize that of a beloved pastor, a loving relative, and a true friend, Ron Tosti, to whom in sadness we say our goodbyes today.